Not too long ago, when Christopher Columbus was considered a hero, he stood for the very American idea of what takes to succeed in life. Many nations claimed him as their son: the Spaniards, the Portuguese, the French, and even some Jews. Today, nobody seems to want him, as he has been accused by some populist historians as being the very impersonation of excess greed, a slave trader responsible for unchecked brutality and even genocide. Nobody wants him, except, that is, for the Italians. The Italians claimed him as one of their own when he was a hero, and they claim him still now that he has fallen from the pedestal. As the poet Robert Viscusi says in one of his poems, only the Italian family will give this old, sickly, and frightened man a cup of soup and will put him to sleep. With today's title, Columbus as the first American writer, not only we wish to give him a warm cup of soup, but in addition, we want to proclaim the fact that it's Columbus, while on the American continent, was the first man to write for posterity a book that we can still read today. Before Christopher Columbus in the Americas, not the local natives, nor the Incas, nor the Aztecs or the Mayans, and even before them, not even the Phoenicians or the Romans, who were found to have landed on America, or the Egyptian and the Vikings themselves have left no record of their history or struggles in America. Columbus was the first to do so. Therefore, Columbus, legally and morally, qualifies to receive the honor and distinction of being the first American writer, as we now, with this program, unabashedly proclaim. With us, we have retired U.S. Colonel Adolph Caso, whom we met in previous interview. He is the author of 16 books, was a Fulbright scholar, a teacher of Italian at Harvard University, a publisher, and a student of Columbus. Mr. Caso's publishing house, in an effort of having the people read directly what Columbus wrote during the voyage that took him to the New World, has published a book called To America and Around the World. In this book, Mr. Caso has written a comprehensive essay detailing some of the issues that plagued the Columbus reputation during this past decades. Mr. Caso, we are pleased to see you again, and welcome.
Very happy to be here.
Okay,
Vito.
here we are. We want to go today in the first part of the interview. We would like to talk about him as a person, not what he did, but as a person to know more about him. But first of all, let's show the people the book that we mentioned here. You published this. It says, yes, To America.
To America and around the world. And it includes the logs of Columbus on his first voyage. And then the second log is the logs of Magellan when he went around the world for the first time.
I see. So you can find both logs in here.
Both
These
of
are
them
both
are
historical.
included, and they are as close to the original as possible.
Okay. And where can people find this book?
Well, they can buy it certainly on Amazon.com, but through any local stores, or directly from my company, Brandon.com. So www.brandon.com.
Since we are talking about Columbus, maybe we can show also a picture of Columbus for the.
And as you know, there are no real pictures of Columbus.
This is only a painting.
Right.
Okay. Now, when was Columbus born?
Well, he was born right about 1420. And he was born in Genova because, as you know, that has been contested.
I think it's 51, I'm sorry.
Right, in 51. He was, his birthplace, as well as Genoa, has been contested by many people. But the fact is that we have so many records, not only family records, including certificates, birth certificates, bank certificates, court certificates, all of these things, school certificates, these have all been found and are part of Colombiana. In other words, these are things that are available, and they've been analyzed, they've been proven out to be true and not forged. So there's a whole bunch of these records that need to be looked at and to be studied to authenticate where he was born and what he did.
Well, according to the book so far, is he was from Florence, from Genoa. Apparently other people have said, but they have not come up with any proof. The best proof we have is that he was from Genoa.
Right.
Who were his parents?
Well, his parents were, again, people dedicated themselves to milling. His father, Domenico, was also an important figure within the city of Genova. In other words, he had received certain jobs that had to do with the political aspect of Genova. So they were involved in a business. They were also homeowners, and the father worked as an authority in Genova.
Basically, they come from humble. They were farmers in the beginning. They were
of humble origin. No doubt about it.
When did he start going to Europe or travel?
Well, he started to travel as a young boy on various ships, and these ships brought him to, for instance, to Greece, Chios. They also ships that took him to England, and it is also said, although there is no proof, that he went all the way up to Iceland, because at that time Iceland had been was inhabited mainly by Norwegians, the Vikings and that. But there is no proof that he actually went up there, although there's a lot of, I think, proof that he may have gone to England.
What was his education?
Hardly any education. Hardly any education. If anything, we could say that he was self-taught all the way.
But
no formal education.
Elementary?
We are not sure, but most likely 2 or 3 years of elementary education.
Now, you said that he began to go to Europe through the sea. Is Genoa, as I understand, a city on the sea itself, the Mediterranean, right?
Genoa is a key port city, without a doubt. And I don't know if you
at that time.
At that time, and Genoa was one of 5 Italian city-states, except that this one was a maritime nation, actually.
Venice was also maritime.
That's right. And the 3 important ones were Amalfi, Pisa, which no longer exists, Genova, and then on the east coast, Venice. And Venice was the most popular, but also the most powerful.
Mm-hmm. But in Genoa, something happened during the time that Columbus was alive. If we can reconstruct a little historical aspect of
well,
Genoa and Europe, the situation there was...
Genoa was more or less a central port. You have to imagine that Genoa is in the northwest part of Italy, and it is between Italy and France. Genoa, as you can see up there, is important because it was the port used by most Europeans, especially during the time of the Crusades, so that any European that wanted to have access to the Mediterranean had to go by way of Genova.
So people from during the Crusade time, which began around 1000
right, that's
and lasted
correct.
about the 14, they would always come to Genoa and start the trip
for the most part
Genova, through the Mediterranean.
And then they went southward using the boot of Italy, both on land and by sea, but mostly by sea, into Sicily, into the island of Malta, which was important. And then they went eastward all the way to the Arab land, including Jerusalem, which is the present-day Israel.
Okay, there's another town here that comes Istanbul, which
Istanbul is important because that was the place that became with the new religion of the Muslims.
But previous to that, it was a Roman. In fact, was the second Rome, or Rome of the East.
We need to establish this particular fact that up to about that time, the Catholic Church or Christian was the monolithic religion. We had the Greek Orthodox on the southern side, but Rome was the seat of the Catholic Church and therefore of Christendom.
But this was also a seat of the Catholic Church.
It was
or
the second
Rome.
Rome.
Second
it was
Rome.
the second Rome.
But in 1453, just about 2 or 3, as when Columbus was 2 or 3 years old, what happened here?
It was taken over by the Muslims.
The Muslims. So the Muslim in 700 years, in fact, beginning from Mecca, had covered all the land north of Africa to Spain, right? And up
Yes.
to almost France.
Yes.
And also southern of Italy and the Istanbul area here. They all became
They were all under
Muslims.
the Muslim
There was
rule.
this holy war
Yes.
that we even today talk about, the
That's right.
jihad. These are people who fight for God, and so therefore they are very fierce.
That's right.
So they were taking over. So during the time of Columbus, there was the fear that the Muslims would take over and destroy the Roman Catholic Church and the Europe together.
The Muslims had tried to get into Europe, always to get into Europe, not only by this route here, but also by the southern route. And the easier route was the southern route by way of the African coast. And they did conquer all of those lands, and they conquered practically all of Spain, Portugal, Spain. They were in Sicily, as well as Calabria. So they really had ruled, and they governed for many centuries practically all of that part of Europe. And the threat was that they would encircle Europe by making a connection from the east to the west.
Now, around 1492 is when Columbus was an adult in Spain.
Yes.
And the Muslims were actually, the Moors were actually kicked off of Spain.
Yes.
They lost the war after 700 years. They got out of Spain. Is that correct?
The Moors were finally defeated, and the king and queen of Spain, but especially the king, decided upon getting this victory, which really brought Spain back to the Spaniards. They decided to create their government and did it by also incorporating the Catholic religion as the main religion. So they had a monopoly not only of the political aspect but also of the religious aspect.
So that 1492 was actually the year that the Spanish established themselves again into Spain.
Exactly.
So the queen for the first time and the king had power, political power to decide to do things.
And it was also the year whereby Arabs and Jews were told to leave or become Spaniards and Catholics.
Now, what happened in Portugal at the time? They were also seafarers. They were.
Well, Portugal was really the empire of the day. There's no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, Columbus and his brother lived in Portugal, and Columbus married a Portuguese-Italian woman in Portugal. Portugal was the country that had discovered the East through Marco Polo and the rest, and had established trade routes all the way to India and China by going around the coast of Africa. Now, what the Portuguese did, which is important, they introduced a caravel, a ship that was quite adaptable to the oceans at that time. And they actually had a very fluent trade with the East, and they were the power of Europe at that time.
That was also a consequence of the fact that Constantinople had fallen to the Muslim, and therefore the trade that existed between Venice, Europe, to the east was blocked, was closed.
Well,
so the Portuguese started going around Africa, and meanwhile Columbus, what he wanted to do?
Well, he wanted to go to China.
Find a new
However,
route.
we need to really emphasize what you just said, because it is extremely important. See, up to the time of the fall of Constantinople, the Europeans, the Venetians and the rest, went to the east by land routes. Well, with the fall of Constantinople, those land routes were blocked, and therefore the Europeans were no longer able to trade with the East.
Right.
Thereby allowing the Portuguese, who really had the ships to do that, to establish the naval route.
And so once Columbus came up with the idea, maybe by going west you would reach the same area. But he left at an early age Genoa, and he went to...
He was about 18 or 19.
And
he had already left. He went to Spain, but settled in Portugal because his brother was also there.
His name was
Bartolomeo.
What kind of work did he do?
And he was a cartographer. He
A
dealt
map maker.
with maps. Yeah.
And so he went to work for his brother.
That is correct.
Making
maps
or reading
yes.
books. Apparently he had also a bookstore.
Sailing all over the place.
And sailing all over the place. Yeah. And then he also married over there.
He married a Perestrello, and he had a child, the first child, Diego, he had with her in Portugal. Now, I think we ought to probably say something about the importance of the Portuguese king, because Portugal was really at a very important position in Europe, right at the Atlantic. I mean, they're the ones who could have really gone west instead of going south and therefore and going east. And yet they did not do that. Columbus presented them a plan to do that. He said, we want to the king, to the royal court. He says, let's look at this information. And the information was that for the first time, many Europeans began to believe that the earth was round and not flat. And Columbus was one of the ones who believed that the earth, of course, was round. He had gotten information from, and I think you're going to look at a map of Toscanelli. Toscanelli was an important person in the time of the Renaissance, and he is the one who came up with the idea that you could go from east to west and vice versa. This is the map that he came up with, and
this is Toscanelli's map.
This is Toscanelli's map, and I think that the date is right here,
1474.
In 1474.
Okay, this is the part of the globe, and this is Africa.
Africa and Europe.
This is Europe or Spain at the plan.
And then on the other side, going around to this other side, you go to the east where you see China, and India probably here, and Japan.
Japan is called Cipango at that time. So between Europe, and Africa and America, there was only water.
Only water.
And no continent. There was found that here in the middle there was a continent.
But the concept of the map is what is important because it shows that some Europeans had reached the conclusion that the world was round and that you could actually go between you could circumnavigate the globe in any direction that one wanted.
But the king of Portugal rejected the plan and probably had the private ideas.
For two practical reasons, really. One, they already had the roots established, and they were very affluent. They were making all kinds of money. They were very powerful. Okay. And two, they said, why take a chance to go out there? No one had ever gone there. Why go there?
So he takes the plan to the king of Spain.
He goes to Spain and makes a presentation likewise. And when the Spanish professors and doctors and all
at Salamanca University
saw the plan, they really concluded, and I wonder if I would have concluded the same thing, that this man must be crazy, because they really did not believe, one, that it could be done, and two, that it couldn't be done because of physical problems. The earth was flat, and they did think that they would drop off.
After the South Hemisphere, you could not come back. You could go, but then you would not be able to back, and they concluded it was not done.
One-way trip.
Well, he had to wait some time before it was approved.
He tried it again, and then the last time, I don't know if it was because he was upset or not, he really once again tried it. And again, he was not successful with the court, with the reception, and he was really made a fool. And then he became desperate and decided, together with his brother, to look and go elsewhere, and the plans were to go to France and make the presentation to the French king, and also go to England.
And then?
And the story is one that just about everyone knows. This man, Saint Angel, or San Angel in Spanish, really had seen the plans of Columbus, and believed that Columbus was right. And so he went to the queen, convinced the queen of the plan, and the queen gave him the permission to go and get...
Saint Angel said that he would lend the money for the trip.
San Angel also said that he would get the money for at least one of the boats for the trip.
Now, who was this Luis de Santangel?
Well, he is considered, by the way, of Jewish background, but the name saint and angel don't quite seem to come together.
For a Jewish person.
That's right. However, he was also the treasurer, but he was
the treasurer of what?
The ecclesiastic treasurer at Aragon.
And representing the
and
Pope.
He represented the church. He represented the Pope, meaning the papacy
in Spain.
In the papacy in Spain for Rome.
But he said he found the money, or
yes.
he collected.
But he is a very important figure because not only did he understand the feasibility of the plan, but he also came up with a certain amount of money to make the plan work. And he is the one that therefore went after Columbus.
If he represented the church, let's take that he represented the church, the Pope in Rome knew exactly what was going on because he must have given also the permission to lend the money for the trip. Do you know anything about the Pope being a Genoese also from the same town as Columbus came?
I cannot give you the details on that, but we also know, however, this, that the church, nothing happened without the church having its say. There's no doubt about it. And certainly, Santangel would not have moved unless he had gotten the permission from the church. And then, of course, at that time, you had, the Pope was not necessarily Italian. The popes were also Spanish. And so they more or less worked with each other. So the church, as far as I'm able to tell, was instrumental in bringing together the possibility and the feasibility of this plan.
Okay, so he got the permission, he went to Palos, and what happened? They hired the 3 caravels?
And then they got the 3 caravels, one of them, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And the way that I remember the history is that Columbus paid for one, the city of Palos paid for the other one, and the church of Santangel paid for the third one. Now, the city of Palos had made some problems or caused some difficulty for the crown, and they were fined, and the fine helped.
And how about Isabella's jewels?
And Isabella promised the jewels. In other words, she said, "Okay, we will give you the jewels because this would have been her contribution if it was needed." But her jewels were never needed. Therefore, she never gave up her jewels.
How many people were there in this convoy of 3 caravels going to the unknown world?
The other thing that we need to clear up as far as, because the tradition says that what Spain did is they just opened the doors of the prisons, and therefore the prisons went there. No, the fact is that the sailors were all chosen, and they were proven sailors, especially Luis Pinzon, who was one of the major ones. So that the people that were on board ship were proven sailors, and they were of different origins of Europe. There were some from Italy. There were Jewish. Jewish sailors who could speak Arabic and Hebrew.
One was an interpreter, was Jewish.
Right, and the idea was to bring someone like this because they knew, of course, the European languages and other languages, but they did not know these other 2 languages.
But there was a Jewish author that claims that actually the seamen were about a third were all Jewish.
Madariaga, perhaps. That's not true.
Not true.
No. But you did have at least 2 who were very
Well, he
important.
claimed that everybody was Jewish, obviously,
including
from Jesus, obviously, and the mother
Columbus.
and the father.
No, this is a history apart.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do not understand, in spite of the fact that you have so many documents to prove all of these things, why they've gone on this trend.
Well, they have accused him of being greedy. What happened there? What did he get in order to go to?
Well, Columbus,
he
whatever
became
money
the admiral of the ocean sea.
He was supposed to have gotten something like a fourth
or 10%.
Or 10% or so of all that he discovered, by the way, and all the things that he got, all the wealth. Well, he died not necessarily a poor man. He certainly died a forgotten man. He was completely forgotten by everyone. As a matter of fact, I need to say this, that on the day that he died, not even one placard appeared on any wall in any place in Spain, or for that matter in the rest of Europe, but Spain especially. Whereas anyone who died, the tradition was that you put placards on the streets telling the people that this particular person had died. Not for Columbus. Columbus died in complete oblivion and not necessarily rich.
When he died, he wrote his last will and testament, and he left some money to his children. I'm thinking he had about two
boys.
And he said to a person in Genoa, Italy, who will then fight to free Jerusalem. Isn't that another indication that he may have been Jewish because he wanted to free Jerusalem?
No, just the opposite is true. This is really an amazing thing that we do not realize, that Columbus was a zealot. He was a religious zealot, and he was a Catholic religious zealot. I could never be as religious as he was. For instance, and we will be talking about this later on, he had an opportunity to name so many of those islands to give them Jewish names or from the Old Testament, and he never did do that. But to the question that you've asked as far as the Testament is concerned, he left most of his money to a Genovese bank for the reason of conducting crusades to free Jerusalem. So this man, up to the time that he died, he continued to be faithful to his religion.
To free Jerusalem, because Jerusalem had fallen already a couple of hundred years,
yes.
actually 400 years, yes. to the Muslims.
Right.
But before it was a Christian area.
That's correct.
So they
and
wanted
so
to free, the Crusades were to free Jerusalem, but from the Catholic Church.
That's correct.
So you're saying that he simply, a person like Columbus, with Christopher Columbus, which Christ, what does a Christopher mean?
Christ bearer.
Uh-huh.
And so he felt that. He felt that that's what he was.
That he was going to bring Jesus or the Catholic in another country.
Yes.
Now he wrote books, right? When he traveled, he wrote a book.
Yes.
Right, which is?
Well, the book that he wrote is, of course, the logs.
Okay, which we will be talking about the next part, second part. And I hope now to say goodbye, and please come back at our next program.